On the other side of things, there are some really marked improvements that you could make within your app. And these are kind of pseudo security in some cases. They are privacy. This is where we kind of are on the edge. For instance, encrypted DNS. This is a big enhancement. Is it a security enhancement or is it a privacy enhancement? I would say both. And what's cool is you're able to configure the DNS address that you want in your application. You can use dot or do, it doesn't matter which one you want to support. You can argue with developers about which one is better. Fun for you. If you're not really sure what or why encrypted DNS matters, just think of it this way. When you communicate out to the internet, you have to go to a website, and that website is a name. When you provide that name is provided to a DNS server over plain text. If you're able to configure encrypted DNS, now no one can observe that name in plain text. It'll be encrypted, and that is something a lot of ISPs or non-reputable people are doing today for whatever purposes. So adding that additional level of privacy and security is great. Another security feature, TLS 1.3 is on by default now. If you're using URL session, it is on by default. That's awesome. That's great. That's cool. Now we're getting into a little bit of the more interesting stuff, and I'm talking about CoreML. What is CoreML? It's the machine learning framework that's a part of iOS. And as it turns out, it's kind of been in your iOS devices for a while now. What I mean by that is, now, let's say, for instance, you have a machine learning model that you're trying to build, you're trying to collect data for, and it's going to consume sensitive information about your user and then help train that model. Well, what if you didn't have to take that data off the user's device and you could do all that machine learning logic on the device? Turns out that's what Apple's been doing for years. When they've been doing a lot of their machine model learning training and all that stuff, they haven't been collecting it on the server side, or at least this is what they've been saying. What they've been doing is they've been using the CoreML framework to process that data on the client side, then collect the modeling data without your sensitive information back to their server. That's how they've been training theirs, and now they're giving their app developers the opportunity to do that too. This is great because from a security perspective and a privacy perspective, you start to think, well, if I don't have to store that data, if I don't have to collect it, there's less, difficulties for me. There's less, less potential problems, and that's really interesting. I think that's really kind of an exciting thing. Finally, anti-tamper. Anti-tamper framework. It's actually in the device check framework. If you're not familiar with the device check framework, I highly recommend you check it out. It is a super cool framework for doing things relating to checking if a user is legit or not. In a sense, it's kind of like a CAPTCHA framework, but it does a little bit more than just that. It came out last year. But what they've added onto it is an anti-tamper detection portion. So let's say your app's been patched or changed or modified in some way, and it's trying to run on a device. Now there'll be a server-side check to verify, hey, does the key match? Does this application actually match what I'm expecting to run? And if it doesn't, prevent running. It'll just prevent running. That's huge. This is part of iOS 14. It'll be interesting to start seeing applications built with that. And if you're a security analyst thinking, oh my goodness, this is going to change everything I do, it'll be interesting. We'll see what happens. The documentation is really interesting. And again, when these apps start getting built, we'll see how it goes. And it does really kind of beg the question, what is the future going to bring? And that kind of brings up another point, is that when do all these things get enforced? When do they all get played into practice? What are the App Store updates that are really going to affect me? Starting off, they are changing the requirements for when you submit apps, and you're going to be required now to provide reason for why you're collecting certain types of data, what types of data you're collecting, and you're going to actually have that displayed in your App Store profile. So if you're, blah, blah, blah app collecting user information, you're going to have that be a part of your app, and a user is going to be notified of that on the screen before they download the app. The other thing too, of course, is in April, as every year, you're going to be required to create your app with the latest version of Xcode. in iOS 14. So if you're thinking to yourself, well, I don't know if I'm going to support these features right away, you have until April. You will have to figure these things out eventually, but you have until April 2021 to figure that out. So be aware of that. Start building out your deadlines. Start figuring out which of these things really affects your business logic, which things are going to really affect your user trust, because you got a decent amount of time to figure that out.